Hello and welcome. Today, we are diving into one of the great turning points in European history, the epic Siege of Vienna in 1683. It is an incredible story of clashing empires, a city pushed to the absolute brink, and a single massive battle that would go on to reshape the entire continent. So, let's get right into it. I want you to just picture this. It's September 12th, 1683. The city of Vienna has been trapped under a brutal siege for 2 long, grueling months. And then, from the hills looking down on the battlefield, a Polish king gives a single signal, unleashing the largest cavalry charge in the entire history of warfare. So how did it come to this? How did the fate of a continent end up resting on this one massive, almost desperate charge? Well, that's the big question we're going to answer as we unpack the unbelievable story of the Siege of Vienna. Okay, so to really understand the battle, you first have to understand who was fighting. And this wasn't just any old conflict. No, this was the culmination of a rivalry that had been simmering for centuries between two colossal powers. On one side, you have the Ottoman Empire. Ever since they conquered Constantinople back in 1453, they saw themselves as the true successors to the Roman Empire. And they had huge ambitions to push west, right into the heart of Europe. And on the other side, the Habsburg monarchy. They were the rulers of the Holy Roman Empire, and they saw themselves as the primary defenders of Catholic Christendom. So you see, this wasn't just about land. It was a clash of ideology, of religion, and really a battle for the very future of Europe.
And right in the middle of it all was Vienna. It's located at this perfect crossroads of Europe, right where the Alps meet the Danube River. The Ottomans knew it, everybody knew it. If you could take this city, you could unlock the rest of the continent for your armies. It was the ultimate prize, the gateway to the West.
For more than 100 years, the border between these two empires had been, well, tense, but pretty stable. So what happened? What changed in the late 17th century that suddenly put them back on a collision course? Well, the spark, as it so often is, was a rebellion. This one was in Hungary. You see, the Habsburg emperor was a devout Catholic, and he was really cracking down on Protestants in his territory. So a Hungarian nobleman led an uprising, and crucially, he turned to the Ottomans for help. The Ottoman Grand Vizier, a man named Kara Mustafa Pasha, saw this as the perfect excuse. He threw his support behind the rebels and convinced the Sultan to declare war. Now, officially, it was to help an ally, but everyone knew his real target was Vienna. And this was the result of that decision. Kara Mustafa put together a truly colossal army. We're talking about a force of up to 170,000 soldiers, pulled from every corner of the vast Ottoman Empire. They began the long, slow march northwest. It was, without a doubt, one of the largest armies Europe had ever seen.
So, in July of 1683, that massive army arrives at the gates of Vienna. The emperor and his court, they fled, leaving the city in the hands of a skeleton crew of defenders who were now staring down an impossible fight for survival. A fight that would last for 2 brutal months. As was the tradition, Kara Mustafa offered the city an ultimatum, but the commander of Vienna's defenses, a man named Count von Starhemberg, refused immediately. He knew that a nearby town had just surrendered on very similar terms, only to have its people massacred and enslaved. So for the people of Vienna, the choice was simple: victory or death. The Ottoman siege was methodical, and it was absolutely brutal. They dug these zigzag trenches to get close to the walls without being shot. Their massive cannons bombarded the city day and night. But the truly terrifying part of this siege was the war being fought underground. Ottoman sappers would dig these tunnels, they called them mines, pack them with tons of gunpowder, and then just blow massive holes in the city's defenses. The Viennese, in response, were digging their own frantic counter-tunnels, which led to this desperate hand-to-hand combat in the pitch-black darkness right under their own city. After 2 months of this relentless fighting, starvation, and disease, the situation inside Vienna was beyond desperate. Out of an original force of 15,000 soldiers, only about 5,000 were still fit to fight. The city was literally on the verge of collapse. But just as all hope seemed to be lost, help was finally on the way. Across Europe, an unprecedented coalition army had been pieced together, united by one single desperate goal: save Vienna. What's so amazing here is just how diverse this relief army was. It was led by the charismatic Polish king John III Sobieski, and this 80,000-strong army was a total patchwork. You had Polish-Lithuanian troops, Imperial Austrians, and soldiers from German states like Saxony and Bavaria. They called it a Holy League, and it was forged by the Pope. It actually saw old rivals setting aside their differences to face what they all saw as a common existential threat. On the evening of September 11th, the relief army finally reached the Kahlenberg Ridge. This is the high ground that overlooks Vienna. And as dusk started to fall, they lit these massive signal fires. For the exhausted, starving defenders inside the city, can you just imagine what it must have been like? Seeing those flames flicker to life on the horizon, it was a sign that their nightmare was almost over and salvation was at hand. So, this sets the stage for the final climactic showdown on September 12th, the battle that was going to decide everything. Okay, so the Allied plan was basically a massive right hook. The Imperial forces would hit the Ottoman right flank, while the Polish forces cleared the tougher terrain on the left, all to set up for the final blow. Kara Mustafa, though, made a fatal mistake, and it was born from pure overconfidence. He was so convinced Vienna was just hours away from falling that he kept his best troops in the siege trenches and only sent a fraction of his army to deal with this massive relief force. He was focused on the prize, not the threat right in front of him. After a full day of absolutely brutal fighting, the Ottoman lines were starting to buckle. At 5 p.m., King Sobieski saw his moment. He unleashed the final decisive blow, an astonishing 18,000 horsemen led from the very front by his elite Polish winged hussars. The impact was just overwhelming. This massive wave of cavalry smashed into the exhausted and demoralized Ottoman flank. The line didn't just bend, it completely shattered. Soldiers threw down their weapons and ran as the horsemen drove straight into the heart of the Ottoman camp. The siege was broken. King Sobieski sent this message to the Pope: Venimus, vidimus, Deus vicit. Now, this was a very deliberate echo of Julius Caesar's famous Veni, Vidi, Vici. He was saying, we came, we saw, God conquered. He was making it crystal clear this was a victory of historic, world-altering proportions. So, the battle was over, but its consequences, well, they were just beginning to unfold, and they would fundamentally change the balance of power in Europe. The aftermath was a game changer. For the Ottoman Empire, this defeat was an absolute catastrophe. It halted their European expansion for good. Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa paid the ultimate price for his failure. He was executed on the Sultan's orders. And for the European powers, this victory spurred them to form a new, much more aggressive Holy League, which would then spend the next 16 years pushing the Ottomans completely out of Central Europe. Ultimately, the 1683 Siege of Vienna really represents the high watermark of Ottoman expansion into Europe. And while the empire would continue to exist for another 200 years, it would never again pose a direct military threat to the heart of the continent. The tide hadn't just turned, it had permanently gone out. And that leaves us with one final, pretty thought-provoking question. If that last, desperate cavalry charge had failed, if the walls had been breached just a few hours earlier, how might the world we live in today be different? It's a powerful reminder of how the entire course of history can turn on a single, decisive day.